on the line with us from the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org, is Michael Sargent, Research Assistant and at the Thomas A. Rowe Institute for Economic Policy and Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation, and the author of a new piece that you can find over at dailysignal.com, a publication of the Heritage Foundation, titled "Ignore Politicians Saying Amtrak Crash is Proof More Funding is Needed. We First Need to Know More." Michael, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. Isn't that argument that you're making sort of like my making the argument that it's no big deal that your brother-in-law died when he was impaled by the steering wheel of his 1955 Chevy because it was working just fine?
I mean, look, Tom, we still had absolutely no idea what caused the crash at that point, what any details surrounding it was. And
it's already 60-year-old technology.
60-year. Well, at that point, we still did not know what happened, and we already had members of Congress come out and say this is a direct result of funding. Never mind that the train was twice the speed limit.
It is. You've got this is a national embarrassment, Michael, and this is what I don't understand about how conservatives and Republicans in particular don't understand the difference between spending and investing. We lose $100 million a day when the Northeast Corridor is shut down. Amtrak doesn't lose it. We all lose it because of the diminished economic activity. In China right now, they've got high-speed trains that are going 328 miles an hour. In Japan, you've got high-speed trains that are averaging 230 miles an hour. The high-speed trains in Europe are averaging between 170 and 240 miles an hour. And you're sitting here telling me that a train that has to go 55 miles an hour around a curve and that averages 79 miles an hour is just fine for America, because to hell with America, we don't care if this country's competitive.
Well, Tom, look, I think you can't compare America to Japan, to Europe. We have completely different densities.
Yeah, 35 years of Reaganomics has destroyed our country while they've taken our jobs.
But also, what would you say, what would you tell me if as soon as this happened, I came out and said government mismanagement caused this crash? Wouldn't you say we have to see what happened? I think that is, you really have to look at the details.
I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist, Michael. I mean, you point out in your article that the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis that fell down and the bridge out in Washington State that fell down were not specifically the consequence of there being aging infrastructure, that the one in Washington had an oversized truck going over it, the one in Minnesota had cracks that nobody knew about. But they were both more than 50 years old. I mean, we have to, when you invest in your infrastructure, when you invest in your country, you are providing the soil in which business grows. I'm doing a business here. This show is a business. I can't do it without infrastructure. I need decent broadband. I need roads to get here and back. I need a post office that will deliver, the check from my advertiser. I mean, there's all kinds of infrastructure that every business in America needs. And you're arguing for 19th or early 20th century infrastructure in the 21st century. I don't understand why.
Tom, I'm absolutely not. I agree with you. Infrastructure is vital, but it's how we provide it. We have to be able to modernize. And the current mechanism that we have doing that, funneling tax dollars through the federal government, is not the most efficient way we can accomplish that.
So you think that we should give it to the Koch brothers and let the billionaires buy the railroads?
I think that private companies could handle transportation infrastructure much better than the government has.
I used to live in Vermont, and I used to take the Vermonter to and from New York City. And while most of the Northeast Corridor, the tracks are owned by Amtrak, and Congress has not seen fit to provide them with enough money to upgrade those tracks, on the Vermonter, a lot of the tracks were owned by 4 different private railroad companies that were all in the freight business. And they didn't give a rat's ass about passenger rail. And so we had to go like 100 miles out of our way over to Springfield, Missouri, and make a turn, and you're going 30 miles an hour part of the way, all because it had been privatized. There are some things that, particularly when it comes to infrastructure, that are appropriately done by government with taxpayers' dollars. Again, this goes back to my thing. What don't you get about the difference between an investment and an expense? You put $1 billion into infrastructure, as Dwight Eisenhower put in today's dollars almost $1 trillion into infrastructure with the interstate highway system. And he made back in today's dollars probably $40 or $50 trillion in tax revenue from the increased economic activity as a consequence of that. That's what China's doing. That's what Japan's doing. That's what every advanced European country has done. Why are we so stupid, Michael?
Well, the problem is that you're right. We have to go through Congress. If Amtrak was private, then they would be able to close the lines that are losing money and then be able to take that and reinvest it in lines like possibly the Vermonter that actually could be operable.
No, wait a second. Are you trying to tell me that infrastructure should make money?
Yes. I mean, wasn't that your argument?
You think that the road, you think Mass Avenue out in front of the Heritage Foundation and this studio, which is next door, do you think that road should make money?
It provides local tax dollars through property taxes and then all the business taxes around it.
It makes money by facilitating commerce. If Amtrak ran at 100% loss, it would still make a profit for the United States government because it is stimulating business.
Amtrak does not stimulate business, Tom.
Are you serious?
It does not. The Northeast Corridor is the only one that is viable. Commuters do not take Amtrak pretty much anywhere else.
And maybe that's because
trains run half full on the long distance lines with hemorrhage money. It is not a commercially viable enterprise.
It doesn't have to be commercially viable, Michael. It's infrastructure. When people travel, they're even if it's not for business. I mean, when people, because I'll give you, the long haul Amtrak lines are probably mostly people taking vacations. But when they're taking those vacations, they're staying in hotels. Those hotels are paying tax dollars. They're eating in restaurants. Those restaurants are paying tax dollars. And to the extent to which our rail is not used by as you point out, it is not heavily used. Go to Europe. Go to Japan. Go to China. China, in 5 years, built a high-speed rail that runs almost 300 miles an hour, the equivalent of Chicago to New York. It took them 5 years to build it. That is creating an economic explosion in China, and they don't care if that rail system makes a penny because it's stimulating their economy. That's what infrastructure does.
Sure, but if you're making that argument, then there are much cheaper ways, much cheaper infrastructure that could stimulate the economy that way. Look at roads. That's why Amtrak has such a hard time on these long haul routes, because you have people that take the interstate. It's much cheaper. It's easier for everyone. You have much more convenience. They are stimulating the economy through travel, and they're taking the interstates. Amtrak is not a viable way. It's inconvenient. It's only on time.
As it is right now. As it is right now, defunded by 35 years of Reaganomics. Yes, outside of the Northeast Corridor, sure. So let's go back. We were the envy of the world. Lincoln essentially built the railroads, handing all that money off to Jay Gould and his buddies, Sanderson and those guys. The golden spike in 64, 67. We had, and that rail infrastructure that we had facilitated the Industrial Revolution that turned America into the envy of the world. And then, when Reaganism came in and idiots in Congress couldn't figure out the difference between an investment and an expense, it was like, oh, we can't afford to pay for this. Of course, we can't afford not to. It will generate more tax dollars than it costs if it's done right.
Well, I don't know about you, but I don't want to look back to the infrastructure of the 1860s. I'd rather look to the future. We have self-driving cars coming out. They need roads that are able to operate. We should not keep taking money.
It's inefficient. It's inefficient, Michael. Haven't you seen the CSX ads? You can move, a ton of freight 400 miles on a single gallon of fuel.
That's another thing. Our rail freight is miles ahead of Europe. It's really hard to make these comparisons on the macro level because we're just a completely different place. We are much more spread out than Europe, than China, than Japan. We just have a completely different system, a completely different economy. And so to make these comparisons is really, you have to take it on a case.
Well, if you're making a case for, Amtrak from Chicago to Los Angeles, I might not disagree with you, but there are large parts of the United States where, well, anyhow, I think we've both had our says on this. Michael Sargent, I appreciate your good nature. Thank you for not taking offense. Michael Sargent with the Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. His new piece, which is over at the dailysignal.com. Ignore politicians. Thank you, Michael.